Justin Herbert, foot injury.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to affect him in season as far as missing time, but it's one of those like, hey, he's going to be hurt all year.
Well, it's plantar fasciitis, which anyone who's been following the NFL for any period of time is one of those injuries that immediately sort of raises the red flag. You know, it's like the thing that doesn't tend to go away quickly. And you hear a lot of the medical people talk, and it's sort of like, yeah, he's probably not going to miss any regular season, but it's the kind of thing he's going to be dealing with all the way through the year. Like, it doesn't just go away, even if it doesn't stop you playing or performing. So effectively this, year one of Justin Herbert in a new offense, which, remember, we were starting to hear talk of, hey, Justin Herbert's way more athletic than people thought he was. Greg Roman, little running offense, like, whoa, think about Justin Herbert in the Lamar Jackson type of offense. And now the guy's foot's knackered for the whole year. So it's definitely a problem for this offense.
2 years removed from playing through rib injury the entire year. Remember 2022 against the Chiefs. Broken
cartilage.
In week 2.
Yeah.
And don't believe he missed any time, right? He could barely throw in that Chiefs game. Remember,
he didn't come out in the game where he literally flinched. Remember, there was a 2-play sequence where he threw the ball and collapsed after throwing it. It was such a painful thing. You're like, get him off the field. It doesn't matter who the backup is. He can't actually throw. I think the very next throw, he throws an absolute dart to somebody on 3rd and long and, makes the play. Yeah, and then play the rest of the year that way.
It's going to be fascinating just to keep an eye on it, right? I mean, everybody gets hurt at some point, mid-season, you're like, oh, everybody's hurt, right? And there's a lot of quarterbacks who have played through injuries. We saw Mahomes in the playoffs a couple years ago with that ankle. We've seen, Tom Brady on the Super Bowl run had a torn MCL or something like that. Guys play through injuries, but this early, right? You're talking about an entire 17-game schedule now. Chargers, even with a new coach and coming off of having the number 5 overall pick, the Chargers always have high expectations. It's the offseason, right? You're supposed to still hit the ground running with Harbaugh running the ball and getting the most out of Justin Herbert. So even though he's not expected to miss time, battling the injury the entire season is, a factor here.
Yeah, and because quarterback is such obviously it's the most important position, but also you're dealing in such sort of small time frames of year to year. It only takes a couple of these injuries before you have to start asking questions about, is he just a brittle type of quarterback? Is he always going to be injury prone? And I think now you're asking that question for both Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. These guys have both sort of dealt with year on year random injury that just shows up and causes them to miss sort of fairly significant time. These ones have been in preseason as well, so it's not like it's in the heat of battle. Everything is a live rep. Everything could injure you. These are showing up in training camp, and now you've got to go, if we already don't know exactly where Justin Herbert is in terms of what he could be overall, if everything's great, if everything works out well, if he's being held back by the system, and now you have this extra little unknown of, is he also going to be a quarterback that isn't quite as durable as some of the other guys?
What about just the value of missing training camp time? And that was as much of an issue for Burrow last year, right? He had the calf injury very early in camp, missed all of training camp. When he came back, he clearly wasn't 100%. In addition to, the Bengals changed their entire offense, right? They were dinking and dunking the entire time until Burrow finally got healthy. Then they hit this stretch of play where he looked back to normal, and then he got hurt again. But the entire training camp didn't have the reps. He was rusty at the start of the season, and the entire offense changed. Now you have Herbert with basically a whole new set of receivers and a new system, all of the time that it takes to build that chemistry, and he's losing out on that. It's a tough blow for the Chargers, even if it's he doesn't miss time. Herbert, is Burrow a good proxy for last year where he missed training camp, was playing banged up, and the whole Bengals offense was atrocious those first few weeks?
I mean, it's definitely not helping, is it? You're bringing in new offense, new coach, new coaches, a lot of new personnel. I mean, all the chemistry between Herbert and Keenan Allen, for example, it's gone. Same Mike Williams, the receivers, significant receivers in the offense are no longer there. So yeah, these reps theoretically are quite important to figure out what the offense is going to look like, build up chemistry between Herbert and his receivers, et cetera, et cetera. All that's gone. So that's going to happen during the regular season, which is not an ideal situation.
All right, anything else on Herbert and the Chargers? before we move on to the Titans?
No, I don't think so. Other than, that, again, because it's plantar fasciitis, and that is not something that typically – it's another one where the year where he played through the rib injury, people forget these things after the season, right?
You just look at the stats and say this is what the guy
right,
was.
Because that idea of should this have an asterisk next to it? Well, they don't ever. You look at the record book, there aren't any asterisks, right? Yeah. So all these things we talk about of should this have an asterisk, they probably should, just so you remember what happened in that season. But at the end, you forget all that and you just look at the numbers that was a down year for Herbert. What was going on there? Who cares? Move on.
Should always have
explanation.
The injury reports, through the year right next to a player's season stats.
So that year where Herbert played through the rib injury that at the very start he literally couldn't function during, that gets forgotten about. So this is going to be another one of those years where we might, because he's not he might not show up on the injury report after a couple of weeks. They're like, Herbert's fine. But again, this is probably going to be something that he's feeling conscious of dealing with all the way through the year. And we might reach week 8. Be like, this Herbert, Greg Roman offense isn't really firing the way we expected it to. I wonder if this is a match that just doesn't make sense. And actually, the guy's dealing with a foot injury that's bothering him.
I'll say this. Again, it sounds weird going from just 16 to 17 games, but 17 does feel like a bit more of a grind. It does feel like just the attrition that teams deal with. In all the talk, they're going to 18 games at some point.
Yeah.
There is going to become a point where we're not full NBA load management, but you really are thinking about injuries differently.
Just trying to get to that second bye.
Yeah, I mean, there's some element to that with how many injuries players deal with that teams might have to start thinking about, keeping their players healthy differently. Remember when Sean McVay took over in 2017? That was the most extreme difference I think we've ever seen as far as preseason goes. He just didn't play his starters ever, never has.
Right.
And he did it with
he really started that.
Yeah, and this was, again, the extreme view of that was Jared Goff was coming off of a season that was as uncomfortable as Bryce Young's last year. Imagine Dave Canales comes in right now and he says, Bryce Young doesn't need any preseason. Right. His health is more important. Doesn't need any reps. We would all be saying, wait, he wasn't even good last year. It's a new system. He's got to get used to the receivers. He's got to do all these different things. He has to play in the preseason. That's what Jared Goff did when McVay took over in 2017. And Goff looked good that year. Completely turned it around and looked like a completely different QB. So I'm just curious how much teams might start trying more extremes to just keep players healthy to get through the grind of the 17-game season.
Yeah, I mean, when I say McVay really started that, obviously teams have been sort of scaling back on preseason reps for a while, but McVay was the first guy I think that showed up and was like, starters are getting 0 reps in preseason. They are not playing for any of it. Most teams have been sort of scaling it back, but, the starters would still get a drive or two or, a half in the important game. McVay's like, nope, nobody of any consequence this season is going to suit up during the preseason. And then a few teams started doing that. I think the last couple of years, we've started to almost push in the opposite direction again. Teams are like, maybe we went a bit too far. We'll get them a little bit of work.
Now it's different, though. You've got the 3 games
right,
and then 2 to 3 weeks in between game 3 in week 1. So the game, because it used to be it's 4 games, starters play a little bit game 1,
right,
a little bit more game 2, peak in game 3, a couple drives in game 4, and then you're done. And now it's maybe in game 3 you want to get some reps in there.
But he really was the guy that started that whole, the starters are not playing at all in preseason.
He did.
And now that's not uncommon. A few teams do that.